15 minutes to Mr. Shiff.
Director Comey, I want to begin by attempting to put to rest several claims made by the President about his predecessor, namely that President Obama wiretapped his phones. So that we can be precise, I want to refer you to exactly what the President said and ask you whether there is any truth to it. First, the President claimed, quote, "Terrible. Just found out that Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower just before the victory. Nothing found. This is McCarthyism," unquote. Director Comey, was the President's statement that Obama had his wires tapped in Trump Tower a true statement?
With respect to the President's tweets about alleged wiretapping directed at him by the prior administration, I have no information that supports those tweets, and we have looked carefully inside the FBI. The Department of Justice has asked me to share with you that the answer is the same for the Department of Justice and all its components. The Department has no information that supports those tweets.
The President accused Mr. Obama and presumably the FBI of engaging in McCarthyism. As you understand the term McCarthyism, do you think President Obama or the FBI was engaged in such conduct?
I'm not going to try and characterize the tweets themselves. All I can tell you is we have no information that supports them.
Were you engaged in McCarthyism, Director Comey?
Try very hard not to engage in any isms of any kind, including McCarthyism.
The President second stated, quote, "Is it legal for a sitting president to be wiretapping a race for president prior to an election? Turned down by a court earlier, a new low," unquote. Director Comey, can you answer the President's question? Would it be legal for President Obama to have ordered a wiretap of Donald Trump?
I'm not going to characterize what I were just saying. There is a statutory framework in the United States under which courts grant permission for electronic surveillance, either in a criminal case or a national security case, based on a showing of probable cause, carefully overseen. It's a rigorous process that involves all three branches of government, and it's one we've lived with since the late 1970s. That's how it works. So no individual in the United States can direct electronic surveillance of anyone. It has to go through an application process, ask a judge. The judge can then make the order.
So President Obama could not unilaterally order a wiretap of anyone?
No president could.
Mr. Trump also asserted in that tweet that that the application or the President's order was turned down by a court. Was there any request made by the FBI or Justice Department to wiretap Donald Trump turned down by a court?
That's one of those subjects I can't comment on one way or another. Please don't interpret that in any way other than I just can't talk about anything that relates to the FISA process in an open setting.
Third, the President stated, "I bet a good lawyer could make a great case out of the fact that President Obama was tapping my phones in October just prior to the election." Director Comey, you're a good lawyer. Can you make out a great case that President Obama wiretapped Mr. Trump's phones just prior to the election, in light of the fact that you have said there's no evidence of that?
All I can say is what I said before, that we don't have any information that supports those tweets.
Well, in my view, then, you would not be a great but a very unethical lawyer to make out such a case. And finally, the President made the following accusation: "How low has President Obama gone to tap my phones during the very sacred election process? This is Nixon, Watergate, bad or sick guy." Director Comey, the President has compared Mr. Obama to Nixon and purported wiretap of Trump phones as another Watergate. What was the gravamen of the offense by Nixon and his operatives during Watergate? A lot of people who may be watching may be too young to understand what Watergate was about. What was the gravamen of that offense?
Well, as I recall it, and I was a kid, but have studied it quite a bit in school, the gravamen of it was an abuse of power, including break-ins, unlawful wiretaps, obstruction of justice, sort of the cycle of criminal conduct.
And it was a break-in of the Democratic headquarters by operatives of the President, was it not?
That's my understanding is that's how it began. The
and it
investigation
also
began.
Involved a cover-up by the President.
Yes, as I said.
Now here I think you've said there's been no evidence evidence of an illegal wiretap by President Obama. Is that right?
I've said the FBI and the Department of Justice have no information to support those tweets.
But there is evidence, is there not, of a break-in of the Democratic headquarters by a foreign power using cyber means?
Yes, there was. As the intelligence community report, the unclassed report said in January, the Russian intelligence services hacked into a number of enterprises in the United States, including the Democratic National Committee.
And there was an effort by the Russians to cover up their break-in of the Democratic Party headquarters by using cutouts like WikiLeaks to publish the stolen material. Isn't that right?
Certainly to cover up that they were the ones releasing it.
Director Rogers, in an effort to explain why there was no evidence, the President and his spokesman, Sean Spicer, have suggested that British intelligence, through its NSA or GCHQ, wiretapped Mr. Trump on President Obama's behalf. Did you ever request that your counterparts in GCHQ should wiretap Mr. Trump on behalf of President Obama?
No, sir, nor would I. That would be expressly against the construct of the Five Eyes agreement that's been in place for decades.
And the Five Eyes are some of our closest intelligence partners, and Britain is one of them.
Yes, sir.
Have you seen any evidence that anyone else in the Obama administration made such a request?
No, sir, and again, my view is the same as Director Comey. I've seen nothing on the NSA side that we engaged in any such activity, nor that anyone ever asked us to engage in such activity.
And if you were to ask the British to spy on an American, that would be a violation of U.S. law, would it not?
Yes, sir.
Our relationship with British intelligence is one of the closest we have with any foreign services. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, our British allies have called the President's suggestion that they wiretapped him for Obama nonsense and utterly ridiculous. Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
Does it do damage to our relationship with one of our closest intelligence partners for the President to make a baseless claim that the British participated in a conspiracy against him?
I think it clearly frustrates a key ally of ours.
Certainly wouldn't endear the British intelligence services to continue working with us, would it?
I believe that the relationship is strong enough. This is something we'll be able to deal with.
But it's not helpful.
Yes,
you would
sir.
agree. Director Rogers, President Trump recently met with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. During a joint press conference, the President suggested that they both had something in common, that they had both been wiretapped by President Obama. Director Comey has just demonstrated why the claims by the President about his being wiretapped by Obama were any evidence. But the claim he made about wiretapping directed at Merkel referred to something that came up in the context of the Snowden disclosures. I'm not going to ask you to comment on whether the Chancellor was the subject of any eavesdropping, but I would like to ask you whether the Snowden disclosures did damage to our relationship with our German ally, and whether the Chancellor herself expressed her concern at the time.
Yes, sir.
In light of this, is it helpful to our relationship with the Chancellor or our relationship with German intelligence to bring this up again in a public forum?
It certainly complicates things, but again, I'd like to think that our relationship is such we're going to be able to deal and keep moving forward.
So our relationships with the British and the Germans, you hope, are strong enough to withstand any damage done by these comments?
By anything in general, sir. We have foundational interests with each other. We need to keep working together.
This time, Director Comey, let me ask you a few questions you may or may not be able to answer. Do you know who Roger Stone is?
Generally, yes.
Are you aware that he was a partner of Paul Manafort?
You know, Mr. Shiff, I'm worried we're going to a place I don't want to go, which is commenting on any particular person, and so I don't think I should comment. I'm aware of public accounts, but I don't want to talk more than that.
Are you aware that he has publicly acknowledged having directly communicated with Guccifer II, someone that the intelligence community has assessed was a persona of Russian intelligence?
I've read media accounts to that effect. I don't want to hurt anybody's feeling in the media. I don't know whether that's accurate or not.
If Mr. Stone acknowledged that Mr. Podesta's time in the barrel was coming in August of 2016, would that have been prior to the public release of stolen emails of Mr. Podesta's?
I believe that's correct chronology.
Do you know how Mr. Stone would have known that Mr. Podesta's emails were going to be released?
It's not something I can comment on.
Do you know that Mr. Podesta has said that it's published?
It's not something I can comment on.
At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to yield to Mr. Himes.